Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and this week I'm joined by three of the best in the industry when it comes to Dynasty and prospects. Got Eric Cross, Jesse Roche, and Chris Clegg with me tonight. We're going to be doing a 6-round, 4-person snaking first-year player draft mock, and it's going to only feature the players who were just drafted in this week's 2023 MLB Draft. We'll be treating this as if it's a Roto OBP Dynasty League. And Eric Cross is up with the first pick. You can find Eric's work at patreon.com/Toolshed Fantasy and at FTN, Rotoballer, and the Toolshed Podcast. Eric, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And you are on the clock.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James. Been looking forward to this first FYPD mock of the new cycle, so it's always very exciting. I did not want the number one pick, though. I wanted number two. I did not want to have to make this decision, but if I have to, I guess I will go. They're basically, these two are 1A and 1B for me, but I will go with Dylan Cruz, outfielder from LSU, and that fearsome LSU team that had just so much talent on it this year. He hit 426, 567, 713 this year. 18 home runs, 6 steals, 71 walks to 46 strikeouts in 71 games. I mean, this guy looks like a middle of the order stud in the making. Hits for average. The contact skills are good. The approach is great. The power's there. Can run a little bit as well. So he'll maybe be a guy that can flirt with double-digit steals early in his career. So to go along with obviously high average OBP, plenty of pops, kind of like a 5-tool all-around stud. And the next guy's who's probably going number 2 here, I'm assuming, very, very close, but I give the slight edge to Dylan Cruz right now.
Very good. And up with the second pick is Jesse Roche. You can find Jesse's work at Baseball Prospectus and on the Tino podcast. Jesse, where are you going with the number 2 pick here?
It's probably exactly who Eric expects. And, I actually think that Cruz is number 1 in OBP formats. And if you're in like a sim-based format like Scoresheet, I think Cruz has a better chance to stick in center. So, and the obvious on-base skills. So I think he is still the number 1 in those formats as well. But my number 2, who is my number 1 in standard formats, is Wyatt Langford. And the big key for me in standard formats and why he's now separated himself from Cruz, and I do think they're incredibly close, and I would not blame anyone for going either direction, is because he landed in Texas. Texas leads Major League Baseball in run production this year, and they have a loaded lineup that is almost all returning, and where they have a big hole is left field, where Langford plays. And right now, their starting left fielder is Robbie Grossman and Travis Jankowski. They basically been splitting work over there with some time going to Ezekiel Duran. I don't think it's a long shot to say that Langford could arrive later this year for the stretch run. I could see him in September to see if they have something that could be used in the playoffs, because this is a playoff caliber team. They are in position to be a playoff team. And if not September, and if not the playoffs, I could see him being the opening day left fielder. I really do think that the timeline is that advanced here. And while Cruz is also on an advanced timeline, the Nationals don't have as much incentive to push him. And not that they won't, because you never know with the Nationals. But he also is just not going to have the same supporting cast. I think just the fantasy production standpoint, if you're caring about run production and more immediate value, I think goes to Langford. And Langford in and of itself, even in a neutral setting, has a ton of upside. He has plus power. It's huge power. The data is not as strong this year as it was last year. Last year, his 90th percentile exit velocity was over 110 miles an hour, which is huge. It's crazy, even with metal bats. This year, it was down. He started the year injured. He had a ruptured testicle, which does not sound great. And understandably, the data was not as strong for Langford, but it's still very strong. He still had an excellent season. He has a more leveraged swing than Cruz, so I think there's a chance he gets to his power a bit more often in Cruz, especially over the fence. And he also has very good bats at ball ability. It's very clearly, I think, above average, at least at the college ranks, above average plate discipline, not quite Cruz level plate discipline, but I think there's been people have put plus grades on his hit tool. I'm not quite there, but it's a very good hit tool. I think he can be a guy who gives you 270 to 280 average with 30 to 35 home runs, maybe even 35 to 40 at peak, with some steals, because he is a good runner as well, just like Cruz. I think he can get you double-digit stolen bases. He's not the most instinctual runner or outfielder, so I don't think he's necessarily a guy who's going to give you 20, but I don't think he's going to be a non-zero. So Wyatt Langford, I think, is my opinion, slam dunk outside of a few different formats where maybe I'd go a different direction, but that's my pick.
Yeah, testament to the quality of the top of this draft that Wyatt Langford went 4th overall. I am up with the 3rd pick now. I think this is a pretty good spot to be. I think picking 2nd or 3rd is a good spot to be. I'm going to take Paul Skenes, who obviously the Pirates took 1-1. Skenes tentatively will be my 8th ranked prospect on the upcoming update and the top pitcher on my top 400. I think that's a very bold call that Wyatt Langford could be up this year. I wouldn't completely rule out Skenes breaking into the rotation on opening day with the Pirates next year. Just kind of given the incentives, if they think he's going to be up early, they might as well break camp with him if he has a good spring. I'm not really predicting that, but just think he's going to be up within a calendar year if he stays healthy. And the health factor is really the only thing. It just adds a different element of risk there that isn't really present with Cruz or Langford, but just a very easy call there at 3 to go with Paul Skenes. Has velocity, has command, really just kind of has everything I would want, barring or aside from a big league track record. So Skenes was a pretty easy pick for me there at 3. Let's go now to Chris Clegg. You were at the dreaded turn in this exercise, the 4-5 turn. Let's hear who you're going to go with at 4th overall.
Yeah, I think this is where you can kind of go multiple ways. Clear-cut top 3. I think you're going to see rankings kind of all over the board after the top 3. And ultimately, I landed on Walker Jenkins at 4 for me in my ranking. So I'll take him here in the 4th spot. Looking at Jenkins, just definitely like a slugger's build at 6'3", 205, 18-year-old prepster out of North Carolina. Big power in the profile. His run times have actually ticked up this year, which is pretty interesting. It shows the kind of athlete that he is. Good feel for contact. I think he's a potential 30 home run bat, like middle of the order kind of bat that we'll see. And the bat to ball skills show pretty strong. I also think he plays up in an OBP format as well. Obviously, it's a little harder to tell with prep guys, but pretty good bat to ball, good plate skills. So I'll bank on Walker Jenkins at 4, knowing that there's a lot of ways you can go here. And my 5th ranked guy I kind of don't want to take because I kind of want to see where he falls to, but I'm just going to do it anyway because it's Chase Davis from Arizona, who had a big year. Davis made a lot of strides with his hit tool and contact skills this year. I think there's still questions as to whether it'll stick or not. Power-wise, I think he can be close to what you get out of Cruz and Langford. Put up pretty similar exit velocity numbers. The 9th percentile was north of 108 miles an hour last year. Made really good zone contact, right around 88% there. So, there's the question marks of, does it translate? Like, it was an awesome year. Like, Davis worked his butt off to improve the contact. He cut his strikeout rate significantly. His 14.3% strikeout rate was actually lower than both Cruz and Langford, while he did play in the Pac-12 versus the SEC. So definitely difference in competition there. But it is interesting to kind of see the progression there. So Davis's kind of knock is I don't think he's going to be a threat on the base pass at all. I think he's going to be a slugger. Hopefully gives you a decent average in OBP, but he's not going to provide you any steals. So this is kind of the question mark where do you take him? Like, I've currently got him slotted at 5th in the FYPD class, but that can certainly change as we see guys debut and what they do. So subject to change. I feel like the top 3 is chalk, but those are my 4 and 5, so I'll just take them here.
And we may get data on Davis if he gets assigned to low A out the gate, and that would with Wood, which I think is one of the big questions here because he struggled at the Cape before last year. But I mean, how much of the swing changes and how much of the changes he had this past year were present when he was on the Cape? Who knows?
All right. Yeah, I definitely randomized the draft order here, but happy we got kind of a shakeup there at the 4-5 turn. I'm gonna go with Max Clark. Kind of a boring pick there at 6. But I do think it's justifiable now to consider college bats like a Chase Davis over one or both of the prep outfielders. And I think it could be even more justifiable. I think like what we see over the next 6 weeks or so will definitely kind of loom large in terms of how these FYPD preferences sort of crystallize. But Clark, I think he's going to be fairly quick to the majors for a high school guy. Up the middle, he's going to run. I think he's going to hit like 18 to 25 homers at peak, something like that. So not a monster power hitter, but could be a leadoff hitter, could hit second, could hit right next to Riley Green for a good stretch of time. So not really that worried about the landing spot. It's not a great park, but he'll be able to play a ton and he'll be able to hit really high in that lineup. So don't mind getting Clark there at 6. Jesse, who are you eyeing up here with the 7th overall pick?
I was going to note, I think that Comerica might actually play to Clark's advantage given his speed. And, it's a huge triples park, and he could get a lot of extra base hits, maybe not as many homers, but it could still work for him. My pick at 7, I really think that this is where things get really interesting in this draft class, and I think that you can go any number of ways beginning now. I do think there's a few players that I definitely have ahead of others, and since this is an OBP league, I think it does matter more in this range than it would in a standard 5x5. And as such, I'm going with Matt Shaw, who's a Maryland boy. I love Maryland. I didn't go to Maryland, but my parents did, so I'm always going to be a big Maryland supporter. He did not obviously play quite to the level of competition of a lot of other prospects, being in the Big Ten. It's certainly a Power 5 conference, and he does play good competition, but that's definitely a question. But this is the Cape Cod League MVP, where he absolutely mashed on the Cape Cod. He's shown that he can hit with wood and hit against quality competition. He has a clean, powerful, short, compact stroke. He's not a big guy, and he was announced as a shortstop by the Cubs. He's likely a long-term second baseman, but who knows with what the Cubs are building right here. We have Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner up the middle and under team control for a while. So it's really unclear where Shaw will end up fitting. And I think that is going to impact his ETA. And I think that in other formats, I'd probably prefer other players to Shaw because of that in particular. But I really love the power speed combination here. I think that it's a clear potential 2020 hitter. He has really loud exit velocities for his size. His 90th percentile exit velocity is approaching 107 miles an hour. His is very good bat to ball ability, a solid plate approach, and he has a plus runner, and he knows how to use it on the bases. He's still 21 bases in like 36 games on the Cape, which is just wild. And he stole bases with Maryland. There's a long track record of running, so I really like it for standard for OBP 5x5 formats, because I think he will get on base, he will walk, he will hit for power, he'll make contact, he'll do all the things you're looking for. There are some concerns about his swing and how that's going to sort of play at the major league level. I'm not as concerned, and I do think some small tweaks will rectify any issues here. But yes, Matt Shaw and Maryland boy, go Terps.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Matt Shaw as well. Eric, I want to just pause actually right here before Eric makes his 2 picks and just kind of get a read of the room. Would anyone have taken Paul Skenes over either Cruz or Langford if they had the number 2 pick?
In a points format, I consider it for sure. But outside of that, I love Skenes. Like, I agree with you, James. Like you mentioned, he's going to be your top pitching prospect. I tweeted the same thing the other day. I think he's, with the uncertainty surrounding guys like Painter, with Tiedemann, and all the others that have graduated over the first half of the season. I think he is a strong candidate for the number 1 spot. Or at the lowest, probably 3, bare lowest. So love him, but yeah, I love Cruz and Langford even more.
It depends on whether you have Bobby Miller and Grayson Rodriguez graduate or not. They don't have 50 over. They haven't eclipsed 50 innings yet. For me, they haven't graduated. I think it's really close with those 3. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not really concerned about the fastball. I don't think it's going to miss bats like it did in college. The type of shape it has, it's not conducive to bat missing. But I think it's still going to be a very effective pitch. Pitchers with comparable pitch shape and velocity as his fastball and release point, all the things you're looking for in this fastball, they still play as plus. So it may not be a full 80 grade pitch that misses tons of bats, but I think it's going to be still a very effective pitch, elite pitch that's going to be it's going to neutralize opposing hitters. I mean, what's really the thing that the standout pitch here is a slider in my mind. It's just ridiculous. It's basically if you took Brandon Pfaadt's slider and amped it up, that's what his slider is. I mean, I think it's a very clear 7, and I think it's going to miss a lot of bats.
And then where would you guys, so if we're all in agreement that it's Cruz, Langford, at least in some order in the majority of formats, I'm tentatively having those guys slot in to my top 5 overall. Yep. Where are you guys at on Cruz and Langford in terms of where they slot into a top 100?
Slotted in at 7 and 8 for me. So
okay,
yeah,
could have gone higher, but it was just, I don't know. Like I had Colton Cowser ahead just because he's up and playing. That was the only reason. But other than that, I feel like I could have pushed them up just a hair, but it was close.
Yeah, 5 and 8 for me. So yeah, I'm right in that same range.
I think they're likely slotting at 2 and 3 for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's definitely, it's kind of a wild time. It's a fun time, I think, to do rankings updates, but that's good to know. And then we obviously know Chris's answer to this, but would any of you, or would Jesse or Eric, would you have taken a college bat over either Clark or Jenkins?
I think that if you're going to take one, I think I can see the avenue to taking Chase Davis in particular in OBP formats as well. I think I really like both Jenkins. I think Jenkins, in my mind, is the clear 4, especially given where they've landed. I really like Clark in OBP too, because I think that he's going to walk. I think he has great plate approach. I mean, his strikeout to walk rate in his senior year, of course, it's high school, it's just absurd. It was like 60-5 or something. Five strikeouts, like 60 walks, something like that. It was crazy. And he has a long track record of hitting and has huge speed. We've seen in first-year player drafts, we've seen people underrate prospects like Clark. These are players like Corbin Carroll, like Pete Crow Armstrong, that the question is surrounding their power, but professional organizations are able to coax power out. And Detroit's done a much better job of developing prospects lately. We've seen Colt Cleeth really take a step forward. Riley Green is coming into his own. So I don't mind the landing spot as much as maybe some do. Obviously, Comerica's not great for home run power, but I don't think it's as impactful for someone like Clark, who is more of like a gap-to-gap hitter anyway.
Did you have anything to add there, Eric?
No, yeah, I think if I would, I have Jenkins and Clark 4 and 5 respectively in my rankings. But if I were to take a bat over them, it would be Davis, who I think is in that second tier. Obviously, my first tier, Cruz, Langford, Skenes. We kind of talked about that. My second tier is Jenkins, Clark, Davis. And I think those 3 are all very close. I love Chase Davis as well. And I'm keeping track of these picks on my own spreadsheet. And before Chris even talked, I already put in Jenkins and Davis 4 or 5. I just knew he was going there just from talking to him, obviously. And we've already had a show about the FYPD so far. But then I was interested to see where Jesse went. I agree with what Jesse was saying about how that's when the draft really opens up. And I actually had Shaw at my number 7 with these next 2 guys are another little mini tier of sorts. So he made my next 2 picks easier. But yeah, if any bat was going to be over the high school duo there for me, it would have been Davis.
And I think that Davis definitely would belong in this group if you bought the improvements fully. Like if you bought these improvements fully, he 100% is a top 50 prospect.
Yep.
But I think that for me, I need to see him hit with wood. I need to see the contact be more consistent. If it happens, if he comes out in his debut, even in A ball, if he comes out in A ball and hits with wood, He's going in the top 50 for me. He's going to be one of those guys who moves up.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the only one who would have gone Shaw over Davis if faced with that decision. And it's really just kind of exactly what you said, Jesse. Like, I just have kind of 10-15% of me just kind of wants to see him do it in another setting other than his junior year in the Pac-12. But and then what Shaw did on the Cape is pretty compelling to me. But Shaw didn't face good competition really at Maryland either, and that's a hitter-friendly park. So I definitely see the case there for Davis as the third best college hitter, and that definitely seems like a kind of a forming consensus opinion out there. Okay, we're going to head to a quick break, and then Eric Cross will make picks 8 and 9 overall. We know the weather can impact how far a ball can fly, but we never know what all the heat and humidity or cold air is really doing to the ball. Home Run Forecast Index gives us an easy way to determine how good or bad the air is for ball flight. The index is calculated by measuring stadium-specific weather conditions and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the most unfavorable for a good ball flight and 10 indicating the most favorable air. There is a strong correlation between the index and the number of runs scored per game and the number of home runs hit. Games that have the highest index, 10 for the whole game, average over 10 runs and 2.8 homers over the course of the year. An index is created for each game, so you can see what it will be in any stadium and how the weather's influence might change over the course of the game, as well as the wind direction. Right now, you can get access to the HRF premium site for only $5 a month and see what the index will look like for every hour of every game. Go to homerunforecast.com now to sign up. Okay, Eric, after all that, you still have to make picks 8 and 9. And it did sound like you have the last two guys in the tier here for you. So where are you going to go?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse, for making my pick a little bit easier here. I wasn't sure where you were going to go. Like, you can go a million different ways at 7. You could probably go probably 7, 8, 9 players at 7. So it'll be fun to see like how that part of FYPDs kind of shapes up after that top 6 there. But I'm going to go Arjun Nimmala at pick 8 here. He's a guy that this might be a little high, and it might be a little high on both these guys. But every time I look at, watch film on Nimmala, dig into more reports on him, I just like him even more. Like, I heard an evaluator the other day said that he had one of the best, batting practices in infield defensive displays of any draftee he's seen recently. So this electric talent, listed at 6'1", 170. I think he might even be an inch or two taller than that. He looks a little bit bigger than 6'1", but potential for a plus, or even maybe even a tick above plus power. He's still kind of filling out that frame, and definitely has some projection to add more. He's a very good defender. Could be a plus defensive shortstop as well. So no real concerns about him moving off the position. And I don't think he'll outgrow. Like, I don't think he's gonna be like 6'4", 6'5", anything like that. Though who knows? He's still only 17 years old. We shall see. But just a big time power. He's a good athlete too. So I don't think he's gonna lose a lot of speed if he does kind of add some bulk to that frame. So I think he'll be at least probably a 50 grade runner, giving you 12, 15 steals a year, maybe even more in this new environment. And obviously everyone's stealing bases these days, but this is a potential 25 plus home run bat, maybe even 30 plus home runs. That I don't think that's out of the question. See how the frame develops over the next few years as he makes his way up towards Toronto. I think is a pretty solid landing spot as well. Let's see what happens if he when he does get up there, what they do with him and Bo. But that's still a few years out. But I just like the all-around profile. As long as the hit total can be at least average, which I think it can be, I think he could be a very impactful fantasy player. So I will go Arjun Nimmala here at 8. And then number 9, I will go with a collegiate bat. Since this is OBP, I think he moves up a couple spots in OBP for me at least. I'm going to go Brock Wilken from Wake Forest. This is a guy that had a walk rate over 20%. This past year at Wake Forest, 69 walks in 66 games, nearly doubled his walk rate from the previous year, cut the K rate down as well, which was nice to see. Had a 506 OBP, 31 home runs, and just 320 plate appearances. I mentioned it on Toolshed the other day on our last episode that I see a little bit of like Austin Riley in there. I think this could be a potential 30 plus home run thumper, big run producing bat. guy that can get on base at a high clip. There obviously are some concerns about, the hit tool, where the contact skills kind of wind up down the road. He looked a bit better in that regard this past year. In raised the average a good 73 points, which was encouraging to see. So I think if he can, build on those gains and keep the K rate in check, continue, walking at a high clip, getting on base at a high clip like he has over the past couple of years, especially this past year, this spring, I think he's going to be a pretty impactful guy, especially in OBP format. So I will go Brock Wilken here at 9.
Loving this. We got a lot of offensive talent flying off the board. Jesse, where are you going to go with the 10th overall pick?
I'll note that Brett Sayer, when we initially exchanged lists before the Major League Draft, he had Arjun Nimmala at 5 on his list.
Oh, boy.
And I was just like, I've got to talk Brett off a ledge here. I really like Nimmala, and Nimmala will be in our top 10. But, no, not top 5 guys. But who knows? I guess he could come out and just destroy things in A-ball, and things might change. My pick, since this is OBP, and again, I think it matters, especially in this range. I think that it can get a little close, and I think certain players drop tiers because of OBP. Some jump tiers in OBP. This is actually squarely in my tier for this player, and I think he gets a slight boost in OBP, and that's Brayden Taylor, third baseman for the Rays. He, on my rankings, he will be 10th. So it's basically right in line with my rankings. And again, I do think that he gets a boost in OBP formats. He has one of the best plate approaches in this entire college class. He has excellent plate discipline. His chase rate is extremely low, rarely chases, and he knows how to hunt the right pitches. He's not the loudest tooled up guy. So if you're chasing upside, I wouldn't necessarily be going this route. But he lands in a great developmental organization. I think that if you look at his surface numbers, they maybe don't. They should pop. He hit 23 home runs, had 14 stolen bases, but a lot of that production came basically in the latter 2/3 of the season. In the beginning of the season, he kind of struggled out the gate as he tried to tap into more of his power in games. But then he kind of settled down starting around April and May, and he took off. And I really do believe in the bat. There's great bat to ball ability. There is power. I think the power probably is firmly average, but I do think he can get to maybe even a tad more in games because he barrels literally everything up. He has a massive barrel rate. I think it's like 25%. I don't have the number in front of me. I just really think that he's going to maximize his tool set. I think he kind of reminds me of like Jonathan India out of college. He's going to probably be a third baseman. He was announced as a shortstop by the Rays. Who really knows? He is a pretty good athlete, but it's not like the biggest quick twitch type of player. But I do think there's potential to have some stolen bases too. I mean, he's basically an average runner, but he has a great track record of stealing. So some stolen bases, 20-ish home runs, solid, and a very good OBP. I think that that's what we can expect from Taylor at peak. And again, great organization too.
Nice. Yeah. I echo most of what you said there about Taylor. That leaves me with the 11th overall pick. We're in the 3rd round now. I'm going to take Tommy Troy, who the Diamondbacks announced as a shortstop out of Stanford. I think he can play really all over the diamond, could maybe even play some outfield. I love that he had a 917 OPS and a 17% strikeout rate on the Cape last summer. Not the greatest competition in the Pac-12 necessarily, but I mean, he hit 394, 478, 699, 17 and 17. So not really a 30 homer guy or a 30 steal guy, but I could see him being someone who hits first or second and contributes across the board and potentially moves fairly quickly to the big leagues. So Tommy Troy for me. Now we go to Clegg with the 12th overall pick and last pick of the 3rd round.
Yeah, Troy was where I was going to. It feels like it's like he was kind of the clear guy left there for me, at least. I'm going to go the pitching well and go the prep pitching well at that. Take Noble Meyer, who I really like and think has a chance to just be a really special arm if all clicks right. Really love what the Marlins did in this draft, getting Noble Meyer and Thomas White. Meyer's a 6'5" righty, 185 pounds, some projection on the frame, and he's already up to 98, like topping at 98 miles an hour, which is pretty encouraging as well. Really good slider. Love the shape on that pitch. It's one of the best breaking balls in the class, I think. It's up to 3,000 RPM. The changeup's solid. You didn't have to use it a lot as a prep arm because the fastball slider combo was so good. And he goes to an org that just has developed elite changeups with a lot of guys. So I think that there stands to be a pretty good chance that this changeup that's already pretty solid in the upper 80s could just develop even more with just a little bit of tweak here and there. So Noble Meyer to me is the second best arm in this class. I think kind of in the next tier of arms, you can go with a couple other guys, but I like the upside here with Noble Meyer. So that's my lean here. And then my next pick is where I'm kind of torn, but I'm going to go the highest person on my board, and that's Aidan Miller, who is a third baseman that fell to 27 to the Phillies, which I thought was a pretty big fall for him. But I really like the bat here. Very just powerful athletic frame. Has shown a pretty good feel to hit, big power. He likely sticks at third. He's got a pretty solid arm. So 6'2", 210, like really good frame here. Good bat to ball. He's older for the class, which is one of the reasons why I think he dropped. He was 19 on draft day. So I think some organizations just completely write off like prep guys that are 19. But ultimately, I really like what Aidan Miller brings to the table here. You probably aren't getting much speed, but I think there's good power and good feel to hit here. So the prep guys, like I just ended up on my top ranked guy there. So I'll take Aidan Miller.
Nice. Yeah, that's a fun turn. Going to the prep well there after bypassing the prep double tap with your first two picks. All right. I am back up at pick 14, and I'm going to take my second college pitcher, Hurston Waldrep, who Atlanta selected with the 24th overall pick. Just really chasing upside here. I could very easily see Waldrep just never making it as a starting pitcher in pro ball due to command issues, but also kind of making a bit of a bet on Atlanta's ability to develop. A lot of the stuff that you would say about Waldrep, you could have said about AJ Smith-Shawver before the season, and he just really had a breakout campaign. And I like that Waldrep seemed to be kind of peaking towards the end of the season. Stuff looked really good, albeit he did walk 6 guys in his last outing. But I like that he's kind of trending up. I like that he was doing it against good competition. And he's got a chance for 3+ or maybe even a couple double plus pitches. So if Atlanta can fix his control, I think he could be the second best pitcher from this class. And then that brings it to Jesse for pick 15.
Yeah, I roster Waldrep in Highlander Dynasty Invitational. So I'm a big fan. I just really hope his stuff gets harnessed.
Do you know who I roster in the Highlander?
I know.
Mr. Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, I was hoping he'd fall on that, but I didn't have a first round pick, unfortunately.
Clegg, do you have any thoughts on that Waldrep pick quick? I know you follow the Braves closely.
Oh yeah, I love it. I mean, obviously there's risk, but you look at the kind of arms that they've developed, and it's certainly a fit. And I think there's a chance at 4+ pitches here, honestly, with Waldrep if he throws them all enough. I mean, the split change is absolutely nasty. I think the fastball is plus, slider plus, and the curve's a pretty solid offering as well. And I think it flashes plus on occasion. So yeah, I think I don't even think his command control needs to be like great for him to succeed as a starting pitcher, because the stuff's so good. Like you can get away with average to slightly below average command. And this is just the kind of arm that they've developed and done really well with. So I feel pretty good about his chances to be a starter. And I think the stuff is second best in the class next to Skenes pretty easily.
His split change is ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's like
Insane.
14 inches of movement, vertical movement off the fastball. It's
Yeah.
wild. All right, well, my pick, a lot of players that I really like just went, and I think that it does confuse things. But again, we're in OBP, so I'm going with a player who I really like in OBP formats. That's Nolan Schanuel. He's a first base prospect for the Angels, and first rounder by the Angels means he may be up next year.
He might be up tomorrow.
Yeah, right. The Angels don't have a first baseman. They don't. They have Mike Moustakas playing first base right now. Their Jared Walsh experiment failed. They just don't have anyone there, and I really think that they're going to push him. Whether that's wise is unclear. You know, he's not quite Zach Neto, who really did thrive on the Cape. He proved that he could hit quality pitching fairly consistently despite being a smaller conference player. Schanuel, while he did perform well against good pitching last year, this spring, he really struggled on the Cape. He was really bad on the Cape. So I think it's a real open question whether he's going to translate to more advanced arms with wooden bats. But again, I think the ETA is going to be very advanced. And if a lot of what he did last year is sticky, my goodness, he has a very special bat. I mean, he has solid power. His 90th percentile exit velocity is over 106 miles an hour, and his bat to ball ability is among the best in this class. You know, a contact rate that approaches 90%, zone contact rate that approaches 95%, just crazy bat to ball, crazy play discipline too. Very much a disciplined hitter. He's going to draw tons of walks. I will say that when I'm talking about all these stats, we're talking about a lot of that's coming against more inferior competition. And I'll just run down his slash line right now just because it's wild. He hit 447 with a 615 on base percentage and an 868 slugging percentage with a 14 to 71 strikeout to walk ratio. Just truly wild video game like stats. And, you know, we obviously have to heavily discount, but I really do think he could be a player that comes quickly, that has a peak that looks like a 290 hitter with 20 plus home runs, maybe more power if they can coax more out of it in games. But you know, if a lot of what we love about or have loved about Kyle Manzardo, I think we can say about Nolan Schanuel. He just hasn't necessarily proved it yet in the minors.
Yeah, and if anybody's like questioning whether he can hit against like good opponents, he had a 3-homer game against Florida, and between Florida and Miami, he hit 7 of those home runs. So like he performed against like good teams. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I just think the Cape performance over 155 plate appearances with Wood is so disastrous that I think it's really raised a lot of red flags with people who need to see improvement with Wood. And like he had 200, 342, 272 on the Cape over 155 plate appearances, which isn't great. But yeah, I agree. He performed against good quality competition when he faced it in the spring.
Yeah, I think that was a classic Angels pick, but that doesn't mean he's not an extremely advanced hitter. Okay, Eric, over to you for the 16th and 17th overall pick.
Yeah, I was considering Schanuel there. I can see him in the OBP format as well. He was on my short list here of players I was targeting. So I'm going to go to a very different player from Schanuel and a guy that, you know, is a very different player from many in this draft. And I'm not even sure if I love this pick, but it's exciting. I'll go Enrique Bradfield. This guy is absolutely electric in every sense of the word. He's the only prospect in this draft with 280 grades. He has defense and center field, which is great. I love the landing spot in Baltimore. Like, obviously we know Baltimore has so much young talent, especially offensively. But like that one thing that they were kind of missing was like that guy that can plug out there in center field. That guy can just go get it, and that's Bradfield. Like 80 grade speed, 80 grade defense, and solid hit tool as well. Like the contact skills are there. The OBP is there. I think he's a big, leadoff type of hitter. Had more walks and strikeouts this past year. Had a 410 OBP in 62 games for Vanderbilt. Guy that could be, in this day and age with his speed, and he's efficient as well. I was only caught 13 times in 143 stolen base attempts in his 3 years at Vanderbilt. So, guy that with his speed, his efficiency in this day and age, and how stolen bases are now, 50 plus is definitely in play for a guy like this.
That's sure. Ruiz.
Yeah, I think he's Ruiz with better
defense.
better defense. I think he could be a better bat. Like the bat's obviously the question. I think the contact skills can be decent, and the OBP skills are good. Obviously, where does the power end up? That's by far like the lowest grade he had. That's you see some 30 grades thrown his power. He had 6 home runs last year, 8 the year before that, so 15 overall in 191 games. Even if he does grow into a bit more power, I think like the max, like best case scenario is maybe gets up into the 12, 13, 14 range. But if he can just be a guy that can like flirt with double digits annually to go along with, a decent OBP, he'll probably score a ton of runs, being, hopefully a leadoff type of hitter or a number 2 guy with all that speed. That's a game changing type of fantasy player that can really impact you in that stolen base column, while also helping you out a little bit elsewhere as well. So I will go with Bradfield here at pick 16. I was having a hard time with my other pick here because this.
Before you pick, Eric,
yeah.
I'll give you like 30 more seconds to think about that. But as I was working on my updated rankings, guys, like I really think the Baltimore collection of position players might be the best I've ever seen. Like just ever, really.
So good.
Just they have potential like cleanup hitters who might hit 8 for them in a couple of years. And so when you say like Enrique Bradfield hopefully leads off or hits second, to me, I'm just like, he's not doing that for that team. They're just they're too good. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a good pick to take him there, but like I'm just in awe of how many good young hitters they've put together.
And their draft this year was fantastic. Again, I mean, I just remember as the draft progressed, we're day 2, day 3, I was like, okay, these are players I like that are available. And the Orioles just like snap them all up, including the arms. I just like, wow, they just hitting it out of the park again. And just a great organization. And yeah, I think I do really like the Bradfield pick in a way. I was sour on him entering the draft, but where he landed, I think he has maybe the highest floor of any player in this class because he's going to play at some point because the defense is so good that he's going to play. And, the hit tool, he doesn't have to hit much to be a valuable major league player and even fantasy player because he's going to run. So, I mean, if you like Estuary Ruiz, like I mentioned earlier, I really think that that's sort of what he could be with a more upside.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, and that's kind of what I was thinking too. Because obviously, with the speed and that defense, especially like center field defense being so valuable to a major league squad, that the floor is pretty high here with Bradfield. And I was kind of sliding him down a little bit down my rankings pre-draft, and then he lands in Baltimore. I'm like, all right, let's get him back up a couple spots there. Yeah, love that landing spot as well. And James, great point there too. Like, yeah, he could have ended up hitting 9th because that Baltimore team is so loaded. Like, if they don't win a World Series within the next 5-6 years or so, or at least get the one, I don't know what's happening, because that team, if they just go out and get it, if G-Rock can be what he can be, and they go out and get an arm or two, whether it's this year or in the offseason or whatever, that team is going to be scary good for a long time. Just adding to the beast of the AL East here. But my pick, I'm going to actually another kind of exciting young team over in the National. I'll go to the Cincinnati Reds. I'll go Rhett Lowder here, who the Reds took at 7. And I think that was a great pick by Cincinnati. Chris and I talked about it on Toolshed, and I think on the Bleacher Report stream that we did during the first round on draft night, that, with Cincinnati, kind of getting to that contention window pretty quickly here, getting a guy like Lowder that is probably going to be one of the first arms up, a guy that can slot in behind Lodolo and Green and Andrew Abbott, and the guy that could help them win sooner than if they went with like a Noble Meyer or someone like that. So like the landing spot there. And I think he's probably one of the, maybe the highest floor. He might even have a higher floor than Skenes. I think he's right up there. Doesn't have the upside of Skenes, but it's a good 3-pitch mix. Got a plus changeup kind of leading the way, and very good command and control as well. Only had a 5% walk rate this past year, and 6% for his entire collegiate career. So he's going to be one of those high floor guys, and that's not kind of taken away from the upside. There's some decent upside here as well, with Rhett Lowder. I think he just screams a guy that's going to be a good number 3 starter for a really long time. Guy's probably have a long successful career, and I think he's going to be a pretty solid, impactful fantasy arm as well. So I'll go Rhett Lowder here, and probably could see him up in the major leagues next year.
He's a right-handed Nick Lodolo for the Reds there. Very similar pitch mix in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I really like Lowder. My in-laws are Wake fans. They were at the College World Series for Wake. They got to see that epic showdown between Skenes and Lowder. And
nice.
Of course, it was didn't work out for them, but it was still
maybe still
next year. maybe. But Wake does return a lot, and this is 10 players drafted from Wake in this draft class. And yeah, I guess it's my pick now.
Yeah.
All right.
To Jesse for the 18th overall pick. And
okay.
This is the 5th round, so second to last pick for Jesse.
I'm going to take the second player right now on my personal rankings because I want to talk about them. That's how it's working here. And also because I really like this player. And that's Brice Matthews, shortstop prospect for the Houston Astros. I love the fit. I think that this is probably the perfect fit for him. This is the type of player the Astros love to target. He has huge power and speed potential. He was one of 3 players in Power 5 conferences that went 2020 last year. Exactly 2020, Brice Matthews did. But the power is very real. He has 90th percentile exit velocity last year of over 109 miles an hour, which is right up there with the big power hitters in this class, other than like Kemp Alderman, who's just on another planet. But yeah, and the speed is incredibly athletic. It's a plus runner. I think that these 2020 or better upside if he can hit. And that's the open question. He did not have the highest competition in college, and I do think that it's great fit. This organization and his athleticism is a match made in heaven. And I hope that they can coax enough out of him that he gets to at least a 4 in his hit tool. And maybe if he approaches a 5, he'll be a monster. I really love it. And he gives me like George Springer type feels as a pick that people overlooked at the time that I think is going to look really good. Maybe even just as soon as the season's over.
Love
Very
it.
nice. I
Love it,
found
love
that compelling argument for Brice Matthews there. Yeah, it's a great fit, and he's kind of like what I always hoped Pedro Leon would be, but maybe he could actually pull it off. All right, I'm up with the 19th pick, and I think this is kind of a it's turning into sort of get your guy territory. So I'm going to take Sammy Stafura, shortstop that the Reds took in the 2nd round. Athletically, I think he pops maybe even more than any of the other prep shortstops, at least from the video I've seen. And, there are some hit tool concerns, but I like betting on this caliber of athlete in this area of an FYPD, and the Reds seem to really know what they're doing in terms of developing position players and targeting position players, and that could be a crowded situation as well, but Stafura is at least 4 years away, so not too concerned about that. I could see 2020, maybe even 25 potential. Just kind of hinges on that hit tool. So now we can throw it over to Clegg for a pair of picks, his final 2 picks.
Well, I was hoping that Brice Matthews would be my last pick. I love him. I'm glad that you've got another fan because I think the analytical fit is perfect. Like the dude's data matches exactly what Houston wants to do, and I think he's going to really take off. I feel like I have to be a little risky here because I don't feel like there's too many safe options left at this point.
Who's the Roman Anthony of this draft class, Chris?
Well,
take notes, right?
Yeah. So I'll throw my sleeper in for the second one, but I'll go Colin Houck with my first pick here. Just a really gifted athlete, 3-star quarterback, like recruited to play like SEC football. Shows you what kind of athlete that you're looking at here. Fell to just gifted to the Mets in the comp round, which was a bit of a surprise to me because the talent's here. He's got really good bat speed. I think the power will definitely evolve and develop because we're talking about somebody that spent a lot of time splitting between sports. I mean, putting a lot of time in his craft for football and baseball. And now you get to see him fully focus on baseball. I think that he could really take off. I still think there's some room to put on a little more in his 6'2", 190 frame. Looks like he could add a little weight and a little more power, but he's already shown to have pretty good power on the showcase, good gap-to-gap power right now, which I like. And I think that a good athlete like this can really develop into more of a home run type hitter. Obviously, he's a good runner, considering he's a good athlete, above average plus run times, really good feel to hit, and he showed a good feel to hit breaking balls too. So I'm really in on Colin Houck here. I think that he's one that could really take off and might be a bit underrated in this FYPD class if all develops right. So I'm going that way. My next guy, like, he may not be like my next highest on the board, but I'll just take the shot at because I really like him, and that's Nazzan Zanetello, who the Red Sox took later in the draft. I have him 28th ranked in the FYPD class, but I do think that just researching more and more that may move up a bit, because I feel like this is a kind of a sneaky pick here with what Zanetello brings to the table. He's a really gifted athlete as well, which is something that I look for more and more now when I'm just looking for really good athletes. He checks all the boxes. Loden Sports does a phenomenal job with athletic testing, and he rated as one of their best athletes. And so that sticks out to me first and foremost. Shows really good developing power, good speed. He's 6'2", 190, just a very athletic frame. And I think that there's blossoming power here. Doesn't chase that often. Didn't chase much on the showcase circuit. Kind of effortless power when you watch him swing. So he's one that I think may really tick up boards, but I'm just going to kind of be in on, kind of young for the class. But if the hit tool comes along, it'll be the biggest thing for him, kind of seeing what the hit tool looks like. But Nazzan Zanetello is my last pick.
Yeah, a lot of prep shortstops in this class, and I think Arjun Nimmala is kind of the de facto top guy, and that got proven out here in this mock. But you could even kind of count Aidan Miller as a prep shortstop, even though he might move to third. Like, there's just so many of them.
So many.
Kind of just pick your flavor.
It's like a great year. I mean, obviously an early pick's great, but maybe you avoid that like middle range between 8 and 15, and then you just load up on these prep shortstops and try and strike gold, because I think it's just I love them. There's so many of them.
Okay, so I have my final pick, the 22nd pick. I'm gonna take the aforementioned Kemp Alderman. I don't really expect him to hit enough, but I think there's at least a chance. I think he's improved enough recently where it's in play, and it's kind of Kyle Schwarber type of vibes to me. If it were to just all pan out, and of course the Marlins have never developed anyone like this before, so I don't.
Payne Burdick is kind of like been my weird comp for him.
Yeah, I mean, like, does that count as them developing? Like, has Peyton Burdick been developed?
Not fully, no. But
No,
I think
not
Kemp
really.
Alderman's like an alien, though. He's like way different than all these other guys. It's hard to comp him to anybody.
Yeah, and so like maybe maybe he even has catcher eligibility some of these years. Like, you just don't really know, but just kind of throwing a dart. I don't have a ton of college hitting. So, that is kind of a place I like to go if I'm not in love with the other options. But high risk, I think there's a decent amount of reward just because of the extreme power that Kemp Alderman brings to the table. So that brings it to Jesse for pick 23.
Yeah, Alderman's also slightly young for the college class too. So, maybe there's untapped stuff. But yeah, what he did in the MLB draft combine was just bananas. And obviously what he did in his college season was crazy. The power is through the roof. My final pick. I'm going to go with a prep shortstop because I've got to get a piece of this ridiculous group.
Don't snipe me. Don't snipe me here.
There's so many. Look, Eric, there are so many other ones to choose from. If I'm sniping you, I'm sorry, but you'll have another great choice. But I'm going to go with Walker Martin. It's
Yep.
snipe, sorry.
Snipe.
Well, Martin was linked to the Giants pre-draft fairly heavily, and I think a lot of people thought he might go at 16th overall. He ended up falling to them at 52. I'm sure there's a very big handshake overslot deal there in place. He had the most home runs of any high school player in the entire country. He had 20 home runs in like 29 games. It's just crazy. Obviously, it was in Colorado against more inferior competition. I think it's a smaller park too. So, I think we can take that with a heavy grain of salt, the home run production. But the power is very real. He's an elite athlete. I think you mentioned load in sports. I think his load in score was like a 9. So one of the highest load in scores in this entire class. And I really think the power potential is huge. I think there's untapped upside here with his bat too. I think that the hit tool could improve to the point that it's at least average. And I think they can get to potential plus power in time. And there's even some speed too. So, I think that because of where he's located, that's dings him in a lot of people's eyes, and there isn't as much exposure in a lot of ways. But I really like him. I know that he's probably Jeff Ponce's boy. I think Jeff is one of the highest on him out there. So if you're going to make a stab at this prep class, which again, there's so many great ones, and if a lot of them already been picked, I think Martin's a great one to try and to take a flyer on here because of the upside.
I'm not really sure how I missed him. Eric texted me. He was like, "Why didn't you take Walker Martin?" I have Martin top 10, and somehow I missed him. I just scrolled by him.
And I knew that. That's why I texted Clegg, and I'm like, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my spreadsheet. I'm like, did I not mark down that pick or something?
That's a great pick. I would have taken him earlier, but somehow I just scrolled past him. Like, I'm just looking at my write-up, so obviously I don't have my actual list. But yeah, I agree. He's a stud. He was a 10 loading actually.
Oh, 10. There you go.
Yep. 3-time state champion quarterback. Like, he's a dude. Good pick.
Yeah.
Great pick. Now we go to Cross for the final pick. Number 20.
All right. Since Jesse sniped me there, after Clegg forgot about his boy, I'm actually going to go to the college realm here. And I know I'm going to have this guy higher than basically everybody else in FYPD rankings. And I don't even think he doesn't play up in this format. He doesn't play down either. Kind of it's like a net, neutral in this format. But I love this guy. I'm going Jack Hurley from Virginia Tech. I mean, this is a guy I'm going to get a lot of shares of in FYPDs because, obviously sometimes the actual draft slot of these players kind of affects, where they go, or at least to a certain degree. I don't, you shouldn't let it affect that, but it does. It bleeds in. So, whether it be, a guy going really high in the draft or lower, Hurley went 80 to Arizona because they need more outfield prospects apparently. But I like Hurley. He was a guy from Virginia Tech, 3-year guy there, hit slash 320, 414, 714 this past year in 45 games, had 17 home runs. In those 45 games, only 4 steals, but I think he's an above-average runner. I think there's above-average power there as well. Maybe even gets to plus at some point. And even if he's just around an average hit tool, like, a 50 hit, 55, or so power, 55 speed type of guy, I think that's going to play. And I like the landing spot with Arizona. We'll see how that kind of shakes out when he's a couple years from now when he's getting closer to the major league level. But I like the talent. He's not going to be a guy that wows you, not going to be a guy that stands out really in any one area, but can just do a lot of things well across the board and be a well-rounded fantasy player. So I'll close out with Jack Hurley.
All right, we got.
Oh, sorry. I'll just brief comment here.
Yeah.
I was writing up Gino Groover, and I was just thinking that, maybe it makes sense to target Arizona for a lot of reasons, partly because Arizona, they do a good job of developing prospects lately, but AA Amarillo and AAA Reno are massive hitters parks, and you're seeing players like Ryan Bliss hit for monster power there. Just imagine someone like Groover or Hurley, and when they get there, my goodness. I mean, I think that it's going to be very forgiving, and a lot of what we do in fantasy, in Dynasty, is get prospects to flip them for major league assets, and I think targeting these Arizona college players is a good avenue to go on it if you're trying to flip them in like a year, because I think that they will be players who destroy A ball and continue to find success in AA because of the friendly confines.
Yeah, I think that's always good to point out. Extreme hitters parks. Like I've been sort of thinking the same way about Cole Carrig with the Rockies. Like, could he steal 50 bases in a minor league season as a catcher? Like maybe.
They let Romo run. So
yeah, good to think about the team context with stuff like that. So we got the 24 picks in the book. I thought we could quickly go around the horn, see if you guys have any takeaways, just kind of in terms of this first year player draft class as a whole, and then maybe any players you were surprised not to get selected. You want to start, Clegg?
Let's see. Player I'm surprised didn't get taken. I like Thomas White a lot, so he's one, like, he's in that kind of second tier of arms for me. I think there's a ton of upside with Thomas White.
Yeah, we had four total pitchers went in this.
Yeah,
Skenes went, Noble Meyer, Hurston Waldrep, and Rhett Lowder were the only 4 pitchers who went in 24 picks.
Yep, and I think there was only 5 in the first round of the actual draft. So
5.5. If you
count, sure, yeah, Eldridge.
Yep.
I think the class as a whole is pretty deep. I really do. I kind of echo with, if you don't have a top 3 pick, I would be fine trading mid to late first for multiple picks later, because I do think the talent's there to bet on. Are there some safer options in the mid first round? Yeah, sure. But there's players that could certainly take off and be worth a pick. So that's going to be my kind of generic strategy, is to acquire as many like throw-in picks as you can. Sometimes you can just get second round, third round, just thrown in deals like to get something done. And I think there's a lot of value in that this year, because there's a lot of guys I like up and down the board. So I would say, yeah, the only player I was surprised not taking Thomas White, but against a pitcher, it's FYPD, so a little bit different. Otherwise, pretty similar following my rankings. So at least from the guys that went.
Jesse, what about you? Anything stand out about this class, or just the nature of the way these picks fell?
I mean, I think the more I get to know this class, which I've gotten to know very well, and over the last month, the more I love it. I mean, it's the hitting side of this class is wild. It's wild, and we talked about the prep shortstops that's so deep here. We talk about this, and we didn't even get to draft a lot of the very exciting ones like Cole Emerson, George Lombard, Kevin McGonigal. There's just so many. That goes.
I like Ty Pete.
Yeah, Ty Pete. Like, there's just so many prep shortstops in this class. It's so exciting. I think that it's a very good draft class to have second, third round picks. If you're in a 30-teamer, any first round pick is going to be awesome in a 30-teamer this year. And we're talking about this class even before we get internationals, because we're going to have Yamamoto entering this class likely, and Lee as well. And all of a sudden it gets even stronger. And I mean, there may even be more that we aren't really thinking about right now. So man, this is a great year to have picks. In terms of players that I was surprised were not picked, I will say that I'm surprised, but not surprised given the room. But like Jacob Gonzalez and Kyle Teal, I imagine that they end up getting selected fairly higher than they probably ought to be selected in my mind in most first-year player drafts. They're 2 players I'm generally avoiding. I think that with Gonzalez, I think his power is overstated, because I just don't think there's a ton of power. The swing's not great. And with Teal, I mean, he's a college catcher, and I just question if there's going to be massive game impact with Teal as well. I do think he'll move fairly quickly, I imagine, for a catcher, given that the Red Sox need one at the major league level pretty badly. So I think in some formats, if you're like a 2-catcher format, I still really do like Teal, and I like these prep catchers as well, Velasquez and Mitchell, in 2-catcher formats. But generally, I will avoid catchers in all other formats because they take forever and they're really risky. But yeah, I was not terribly surprised by the picks in this draft. I think you all are do great work, and you know your stuff.
With Kyle Teal, I'm right there with you. I do think it was the perfect landing spot going to Boston, so I'm higher on Teal than I would have been if he just got into a random team. But
yeah, me too.
All right, Eric, what about you? Any final thoughts? Any thoughts about the class?
Yeah, no, I echo a lot of what Chris and Jesse just said. It's a really fun draft class. Obviously, it's a lot of hitter heavy at the top. So, but once you get in 35 to like 65 or so range, kind of like 50 give or take. There's a lot of talented pitchers down there as well. So this is a draft where I'll probably load up on hitting early, which I usually do anyway. But even more so this year, maybe I'll grab a couple of arms back there, see if something sticks. Maybe go with an upside guy like a Josh Noth who went to Milwaukee, which is a great fit there. Some guys like that. Maybe I'll take a stab on in the middle rounds. But yeah, I wasn't really. I won't say I was surprised to not see anybody go. There were a few players I was just intrigued to see if they would go, like Jacob Gonzalez. I didn't think Dollander would go just going to Colorado, but he's a guy that's just interested to see where he falls in general.
Where does everyone have him?
I have right now. I keep moving him down every couple
He's
of days.
Way down for me.
I have him at 32 right now. I keep moving him down like a few spots every time I look.
Yeah, he wasn't in my top 50.
Yeah, I have him at 49 right now. Partly because Brett says he has to be in the top 50. So, all right, fine. He'll be at 49.
Right.
Do you like Jacob Wilson or Jacob Gonzalez better?
I like Gonzalez better personally.
Yeah, I don't
especially in OBP, because I think Wilson's going to play down OBP. I mentioned this to Jeff that I think Wilson's sort of like Nico Horner if he didn't run. It's like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I'm out.
So,
well, yeah, I think that's
yeah.
It's just such a weird. I said this when I was on Welsh's pod. Like, I think the players that went 6 through 10 in the real draft, Wilson, Lowder, Mitchell, Dollander, Meyer, on average probably don't go top 10, and none of those probably have a top 10 like first year player draft ADP, which is just kind of wild.
Yeah, I do. I like, Chris mentioned, I do like Meyer, and I love the fit. For Meyer. That slider he has is wicked, and I think he reminds me of a lot of Jackson Jobe, personally. I think but he lands in a much better spot. So like if we rewound a couple of years ago and did that draft, or a year ago, did that draft over again, and put him in Miami, Jobe in Miami, this could be what Meyer is, and I really like the fit. But yeah, it's a weird area, and this is always important in first year player drafts. Do not pay too much attention to draft position. Major league teams have they don't care about fantasy.
That might be more true in this class than any class I can recall, where you have to kind of go all over the place with your first year player draft. Like, how about we go quickly? You guys let people know where they can find you and what you've been working on lately. We start with you, Eric.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me, James. This was a lot of fun. Nice little exercise here with a sharp room. You find me on Twitter at EricCross04. Obviously, all my work over on my Patreon, Toolshed Fantasy, which is linked in my bio on Twitter, and obviously over at RotoBaller and FTN Fantasy as well, and the Toolshed podcast every week with Mr. Chris Clegg.
Awesome. Chris, what about you?
All my written work now is at the dynastydugout.com, rankings, all that stuff. Been work on FYPD write-ups. This was perfect for that. Slotting in these guys in prospect and dynasty rankings, trying to do write-ups pretty much every day, covering minor leagues, what happened, what you need to know for fantasy, and then the Toolshed pod as well. And everything goes to Twitter as well at RotoClegg. And Jesse.
I will say, what you two are doing, Eric and Chris, is awesome. Love what you're doing after Fantrax. It's very cool. Very cool stuff. And I get a little jealous sometimes.
Hey, you're doing great work too, Jesse. Great work.
You can find me over at Baseball Prospectus. I will put out weekly columns right now. We have the top 100 first year players from this draft class scheduled for Friday, and I've written up a lot, way too many. And then I'll be updating the top 500 Dynasty prospects next week on July 21st, which will include all the new draftees and a ton of graduations and movement all around the rankings. I'm sure you all are enjoying the changes in these rankings. And finally, Royce Lewis has graduated. And we no longer have to rank him. Not that it's a bad thing to rank Royce Lewis, but he's graduated. Yay. But I'm also doing the Tino podcast. There is no off season, and it's not necessarily a weekly podcast, but I try and get out episodes as much as possible. We'll be doing another episode in the next week or two on this draft class and sort of just a fantasy fallout of the Major League Draft.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. I don't know if it's possible, but I'd love it if Joey Ortiz and Matt Mervis could graduate before the next set of rankings are due. But yeah, I'll have my rankings updated before the end of the month. Really appreciate you guys stopping by and helping me do this. Definitely support everything that Eric and Jesse and Chris are doing. Really appreciate everyone for tuning in. This has been the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'll be back next week.